Welcome to Controlled Fire, hosted by Native Roots Radio. I'm Hunter Thundercloud with Arrow Funmaker and Alec Thundercloud. Thank you for joining us today, Alec Thundercloud. Before we get started today, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Hunter. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Thundercloud. I am a pediatrician by training, and I serve as Thundermaker's medical director. I have a history of working at both within the private, federal, and tribal sectors, at a local, state, and the federal landscape, and I'm excited to be here today.
Oh, thanks for joining us. How long have you been in the medical field?
I graduated from the University of Minnesota in 1998. So I have been considered an MD since 1998.
It's a long time. I was in middle school then. And so, what's our relationship? I mean, we're all Ho-Chunk, actually.
Yeah, I think we're all related in some way as Ho-Chunks, but in kinship way, I would be considered your uncle or your Dega.
Aho. What about with Arrow?
Arrow is a fun maker, and so the fun makers are kind of in a different clan and class than the Thunderclouds, but Arrow would be a cousin.
Oh,
We accept him. He is one of us, as they would say
One of
in
us.
The Wolf of Wall Street.
good one.
Well, today we wanted to talk about stigma and stigma with recovery in the Native community, and how it affects us.
Yeah, I think stigma is a great topic when you talk about mental illness and addiction. The history of the word stigma is very interesting because it historically came about because of disease states, especially diseases that cause deformities within people. For example, rickets would cause bow legs, leprosy caused, malformations in your body and whatnot. And there was a certain disgrace associated with having those diseases. And I think within Indian country, it sort of expanded just beyond that sort of visible stigma that you see with a disease state. There has become sort of a deeply rooted or seated society outlook on the disease because of, one, our cultural beliefs, two, the close kinship that we have within our communities. And what you see is it marginalizes many of our community members in various aspects of their life that go beyond just seeking treatment, but it goes into the community's perception of that person either as a failure to their family, a failure to their community, or even as far as not even allowing intermarriages or relationships to occur because of the perceived defect of that person's personality, character, or moral value or spiritual failing.
Which is, that's a hard thing because, I mean, the addiction rate in our communities is 50%, maybe even higher, depending on the communities. I mean, if we still continue to view these things as stigmas, even though it's happening so much, I mean, are there solutions to it, do you think? I mean,
Yeah, I think when you start thinking about solutions, I like to back it out and sort of look at the different types of stigma, right? So, for example, you have just the overall public stigma that's associated with addiction, right? And when you have that public stigma, what you see in our communities are a lot of the negative stereotypes around natives tribes and their relationship with drugs and alcohol. And so you've already got that perceived notion of, as a people, we are maybe less than, or we already have an inherent failure built into us, right?
Mhm.
Because of these stereotypes. And, our children grow up with those stereotypes. And so that leads to the other layer of that self stigma, that shortcoming, that belief system in yourself that, what, I'm not going to be that failure. And what that leads to is a setup, right? To when you do have those issues, you avoid seeking treatment, right? And then I think you also have another layer of the structural stigma, right? So, because of the public, the self stigma that you have layered in our communities, it then leads to a structural sort of systemic barrier because as people, we always bring our own belief systems into how we deliver care within our communities, right?
Mhm.
And if we're growing up with these beliefs, we are internalizing these beliefs, the way that we deliver the health care or allocate it to our community members, our tribal members, also becomes part of that barrier, right?
Mm.
Um, and then the last layer of stigma I like to talk about is that vicarious stigma or vicarious trauma, right? We all have family members who have been affected or impacted by this disease, right? And so we get that sort of vicarious belief system of I've got a relative who's impacted. And when I get that vicarious stigma, I can either one, become a true advocate in the community,
Mhm.
or I can also be part of the problem within that community.
Mhm.
So I think when you think of it that way, those are all of the layers of attack or ways you can overcome stigma, right? It's about public education, getting the right messages out to the community, and then targeting the community appropriately. Who do we target? We need to target the elders. We
Mhm.
need to do prevention with the children.
Mhm.
We need to ensure that we have appropriate policies in place within our community so that we don't have systemic barriers, so that we have easy access through policies within tribal government and within our communities.
It's true. I mean, when we look at access, I mean, it seems like a lot of tribes have enough funding, right? But do they have the infrastructure to implement the funding? I mean,
Mhm.
do they implement it when they have the funding? I think that's one of the things I think is maybe a failure, but an
Mhm.
unknown. It's tribes originally weren't set up with governments the way we have right now. So even that
No.
is a new system for us. I mean, deciding that we have a you know three judicial, executive, and I mean all that stuff is new. I
Mhm.
mean, and they're expecting us as tribal people to implement and heal our people through a lens of maybe a colonizer or
Mhm.
you know are we able to work in that structure? It doesn't feel like we are yet. I mean, since we're still learning it. I mean,
Mhm.
and to me, that feels like it's a preventative for access for care for people in our communities.
Yeah. And I think, I think what you're nailing it on the head uh, with historical trauma or that intergenerational trauma, and how that not only impacts us as individual human beings, but it's impacted us as an entire nation, or 575 federally recognized tribes or nations within this country.
Mhm.
And like you said, you look at tribal governments within all of these nations, most of them are based on, the U.S. Constitution or federal government.
Mhm.
We can go back and be very prideful about the fact that maybe the Constitution was based on tribal governments to begin with, right? But now we're creating our own systems of government as we exercise more of our inherent sovereign rights, but we're modeling them after the U.S. government. And it's a learning curve. We have to learn to work within those systems because we're competing for federal dollars, we're competing for state dollars, and we're getting this funding with very little to no infrastructure sometimes
Mhm.
to, you know, to set up programs for addiction or for mental health services. Uh, and we're also dealing with rural areas where we can't attract the talent that we often need to make these programs successful.
This is true. I mean, how do you get a doctor to go up to, or a therapist or a psychiatrist to go into the middle of North Dakota, and have them stay longer than 2 years?
Yeah, it is very difficult. Unless, we found success in pipelining, you know, providers that come from those communities. But when you look at the overall statistics of Native people that go into higher education, we're less than 1% of any major university college campus, and less than 1% of any sort of professional field. So when you look at any field in medicine, whether it's in the behavioral health field, nursing field, or medical field, we just don't have enough folks to go around. And then when we look at our non-tribal partners and folks that do have a passion or interest in working within these rural communities, they face certain challenges with acclimating to learning to live in those communities, learning to assimilate to the cultures and function within those cultures without being offensive to the people that they're serving. And sometimes we need to provide some of those folks a little bit of grace because they do come with a open heart and a willingness and a passion to want to help many of our people. But then at the same time, we've been traumatized by the system and by outsiders for so long. We've become also very untrusting of folks that come into our community that want to help.
And what's it? We have all these ceremonies, right? And traditional healers. I mean, in my opinion, why aren't we using more of that? I mean, I think Arrow knows and has spent his whole life working in that part of the healing. And it's like, because we are using federal dollars, are we able to um, compensate or make sure there's enough healers that actually their only job? Like, we're not allowing that to be part of our communities as a resource almost. It's like you have to have a real job and still offer ceremonies on the side. Like,
Mhm.
maybe if we were able to be really sovereign, we would choose to do something like that.
Well, I think that's one of the changes that we're trying to promote is creating, you know, more healthy ways of combating that stigmatism within, cultural communities and behavior health and addiction and things like that. Like, you know, we understand that there's a problem, and how much are we willing to move forward to help contribute to the change. I do think that there's a big change, a shift taking place right now to where, this generation now, they're a little more outspoken and a little more willing to, like, share their feelings and contribute to the change, and being able to, like, witness that, I think has been pretty beneficial to us at Thundermaker. Dr. Thundercloud, do you think there's change taking place within that scope of stigmatism within behavioral health in Indian country?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. From even a personal standpoint, growing up in a close knit, small Native community, and seeing how addiction and mental illness was perceived by my elders and by my parents and people growing up. It definitely was something you did not talk about. It was not an open discussion. You did not share it outside of the family. It was definitely a family secret. To, you know what, now as a people were a little more educated about, what mental illness is, what addiction is, and, we're allowing our people to talk about it more openly. And I think that historical trauma and the systemic traumas that our communities have faced, and the understanding of all of the relocation, like with Ho Chunk Nation being relocated, what, 17 times or more?
Yeah.
And, how our communities, why we have communities in so many different areas throughout Wisconsin, that was all because of the way that we were treated historically. And so I think that has allowed us to separate the trauma, or the addiction and the mental health issues, more from a personal failure to us being able to have a discussion about the impact on us as a community, as a people, as a whole. So it feels less like a personal attack and more like social advocacy and speaking up for the people.
I think all of that's contributed to the stigmatism that we face today. Is even within ceremony, like you mentioned, Hunter. Like we were always doing things in secret, and we weren't open to sharing or being open with the ceremonies. Everything had to be hidden, and even within our cultures back in the day, everything was hidden. Everything was talked about behind closed door, and there were certain things that we didn't talk about. In today's world, like, that's not beneficial to us as human beings, not just as Indian country, but as human beings in general. Like, we need to feel a sense of safety to be able to be out in the open and say, we participate in ceremony, we know our songs, we know our language, we know our food, and I'm not okay mentally, I'm not okay, I'm struggling, and having that ability to, like, share that with your family members and the people that care the most about you. Like, look, I am struggling, I am having a hard time, and having accessibility to medicine people and doctors and therapists and medical providers and places like Thundermaker. We're one of many programs out there that are striving to create this change that's so necessary and vital to the survival of our people. And how are we going to make that change if we're not all collectively willing to participate in that change? Like, I'd like to see this change happen with in Indian country, to where collectively we are coming together. You spoke about our people competing for dollars, competing for federal grants. What if collectively we came together and we didn't have to compete anymore? Even that whole sense of competition, that's a colonized way of thinking. Sure, there was healthy competition back in the day, but to compete for funding to help create sustainable programming to help our people survive, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, that's a ridiculous mindset. It needs to change.
I mean, I guess that's part of the stigma, right? I mean, even being able to talk about it like this, I mean, saying our tribe's actually giving enough access to their members. I mean, I we have talked to tribes that are saying, if we don't invest in our members, are they going to exist? I mean, will we have a tribal community? I mean, if we look at the death rate in most communities with addiction, it's higher than everywhere else in the U.S.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I mean, and so
absolutely.
until we invest in them, I mean, what else should we be investing in if not our own people?
Right.
And I think that gets to some of the conversations that we see with the investment in our tribal members, in their livelihood, their futures, and future generations. Is behind that conversation or an undercurrent of that conversation as well. But we're enabling them by providing them with these resources. And I think that is part of the stigma, again, of not understanding the disease of addiction and understanding that this is a disease
Hmm.
like diabetes, like high blood pressure, like cardiovascular disease. I think when it comes to diseases of the mind, um, we formulate a lot more opinions on the treatment and the treatment modalities than the treatment plans, right? We don't question the treatment of diabetes or the treatment of high cholesterol or high blood pressure the way we question the treatment modalities for addiction and
Mhm.
behavioral health.
I mean, but is that true?
I-
I mean, diabetes is still is
Mhm.
rampant, right? I mean, high blood pressure is the same way. I mean, are we actually taking our health serious in a lot of communities, or is it because we have, you know, food deserts, right?
Mhm.
Do we have enough access to quality food? I mean, is it because we're impoverished? I mean, you know, it's all these issues that really are affecting our communities. I mean, how do we stabilize them? Do we create a middle class? I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're getting to, a larger socio-economical picture here of we do live in rural areas. Most of our people come from rural areas, despite the fact that a majority of our population, 80% of natives live in urban areas, right? Um, but you're talking about the social determinants of health, right? We
mhm,
don't have access to good food sources. We don't have access to good educational systems. We don't have access to a strong, robust housing system, right?
mhm,
And we don't have access to a good medical system. We rely upon, our federally funded tribal facilities, and we know those are underfunded and they don't meet the needs of our communities when it comes to providing overall good treatment for tribal members. And to do that, you're absolutely right. You need to look at the whole person. Let's take it back to diabetes, right? If you don't have access to good food sources, a nutritionist, someone who can help you learn how to do physical activity, and ensure that you're in stable housing so that you're not worried about either where you're going to be living tomorrow versus whether or not you're going to get your diabetes medication, you're not going to be in a place where you're going to be able to treat yourself, to the highest level possible, are you?
so, well, with that, we're gonna take a quick break. You know, let's, and then in the second segment, we'll keep going. I mean, this is a good conversation.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
Whoa.
Through song we pray, through dance we think of our
And then the music. Welcome back to Controlled Fire with Hunter Thundercloud, Era Funmaker, and Dr. Alec Thundercloud. We'll get back to our conversation about stigma in tribal communities. So,
Okay. All right. Well, I wanted to go off a little bit about what Era was talking about in terms of the traditional community within many of our tribal nations and the impact of historical trauma on that and how we see it with our traditional practices and how those were passed down. I think what we've experienced as tribal communities, and I think if you look at the Native American church, right, that was sort of an evolution of how do we continue practicing our traditions and ceremonies when our belief systems or the way that we practice those, were being persecuted and we weren't as people allowed to do it. And so it evolved, right? But then a second piece of that evolution is we also lost pieces of that. Some of our traditional teachings and traditional practices. And I think what we've experienced as people growing up, especially I think my generation, where I saw the loss of our language. My grandparents couldn't speak English at all. I mean, they only spoke our traditional Hokkak language, and most of the elders in my community, that's all they spoke. Um, and then, of course, my parents were bilingual, and that generation was bilingual. But they thought that, it would be easier for us to speak English. But when we would ask questions about, why do we do something this way, it was met with either irritability or some anger. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized that, some of that was reactive to the fact that perhaps they didn't really know the answers anymore.
Hmm.
And there wasn't that self-realization yet of, well, I don't know it either, but let me find out and let's figure this out together so that we are keeping it alive, right? Because there was a secrecy, right, to a lot of the traditions and ceremonies, but then you add that extra piece of some of it was taken away from us,
Mhm.
right?
Well, a lot of it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, boarding schools, I mean, it's intentionally taken away. I mean, and I think that's what's nice about some of the younger kids now. A lot of people are really proud to be Native. I
Mhm.
mean, I think growing up, I always knew I was Native, right? But I don't know if I was proud the same way I am now. And it seems
Mhm.
like when I see younger kids, you have Native pride shirts everywhere. I mean, which is, I think it's a great thing, but it's, what does that mean? I mean, since we're proud to be Native, are we willing to figure out what our traditions are? Are willing to be involved in them? Because I do think culture is one of the things we can always rely on when we're lost.
Yep. And I think that is a lesson learned here with Thundermaker is, we take tribal members from all over the nation, right? And we bring in a sense of traditional or cultural identity with the treatment modalities that we have. May not be pertinent to their particular tribe, but it does instill a sense of pride or dignity back into the people that we're serving. And what I see is it's a huge step in overcoming, what I talked about earlier with that internalized self stigma that we have as people
Mhm.
because of the negative stereotypes, the negative experiences we've had when we leave our communities. And, we try to do things that better ourselves per se with a higher education or trying to find better work opportunities, um, but it instilling that pride and that dignity and that self-awareness of yourself as a native man, a native woman, or even someone who is from the two-spirit community. It's so healing for the soul, and it's the best medicine.
And we need those people in our communities, right? We need people to go and understand how, you know, the outside world actually functions, so we can come back and help create our economy so we have stability. I mean, I don't know if taking a look and looking at dominant culture's medical system makes sense, because I think that's failing everyone. Unless you have a quality job or something where employers are paying for your insurance. But if you're uninsured or underinsured, I mean, you which I think is failing most people in the country. It's like we talk about sovereignty, so we should be really working on what it means to be sovereign, and deciding that our cultural and traditional healing practices should be involved, and shouldn't be the it shouldn't be you know something we're doing on the side, or it should be the root of what we're doing, the piece that we build everything else off of.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that creates the necessary change, having that as the focal point and not something extra added, or something that we participate and do on the weekends, um, and that's another thing, accessibility, like how many tribal members or youth have, or people struggling with this have access to traditional practitioners. How many people have access to medicine people, or people that know the songs and the teachings behind it, like Dr. Thundercloud was saying, uh, the language, it's important, finding who we are, but not everybody, knows the right person in your community to go speak to. And then even creating the time, even down to like, how do you approach somebody? I remember some years back, I heard a conversation in passing where somebody wanted to learn a new song. Not a new song, it's an old song, but to the person it was a new song. But he just, went out and asked, "Hey, I would like to know this song. Could you send this song to me?" And the other person that knew the song was like, "That's not the way you approach me. That's not the way you ask for this knowledge. That's not the way you ask for this song. Like, there's a protocol, there's a way to go about doing it." But not everybody understands that. Not everybody knows if there is a certain way to approach an elder, or some knowledge keeper, to ask for help, to ask for that guidance, or ask for that time, because our time is valuable, right? Of course. But how do we show our people, how do we show our youth, and our relatives there's a way to go about it, like bring some groceries to an elder and just sit down with them for a while, um, like for us, we kind of look at ourselves as a classroom. Every time we participate in ceremony, we treat it like it's class, and nobody's berated or talked down upon if they make a mistake. And the only way, like the saying is, we don't know what we don't know, right? So how do we instill that within ourselves today? Like, how do we learn there's a way to go about asking for traditional knowledge, I guess, which, I mean, I understand the history behind it, but if we don't take the time to actually sit down and share this traditional, cultural, generational knowledge, we know people that have passed away that have taken this spiritual education with them, and like Dr. Thundercloud, it's gone. The ceremony's gone. The songs are gone. The teachings are gone. But we're so, sometimes we're unwilling to take that time, that necessary time, and that's a part of the evolutionary change that needs to take place within Indian country. We need to be more accessible. We need to show more kindness, show more, collective ways of participation. Like,
Well, it's that kindness and love, right?
right,
I mean, that is going to be the thing that probably heals us. I mean, we talk about all this generational trauma, and I think everyone talks about it now. I mean, people know the words generational trauma, right? But if we're not going to take steps to try to figure out how to heal, I mean, with kindness and love, does it matter?
right.
I mean that
Yeah.
that's that stigma all around, right? From generation to generation.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it ties into that sort of negative internal messaging that we have to ourselves. When you talk about the correct way to approach somebody and ask them for something, yeah, I, is that tobacco? Is that money? Is that sitting down and having a meal with the person that you're going to make a request of? It varies, right?
Hmm.
It's going to
Mhm.
vary by tribe, and even within that tribe it might vary by your relationship as a different clan,
Mhm.
Right.
right? And you know what, if no one is actually walking with you and showing you how to do that, on a personal level, yeah, you're getting advice from several different people
Hmm.
and maybe different clans who might not even give you the right advice because they're giving it to you from their clan perspective, as
Mhm.
you know from their clan leader, versus you could be stepping on a tribal landmine that you're not even aware of because it's not the way that your clan functions. So
Right.
there are just so many layers to tribal protocols, um, within all of our communities, that sometimes for me as a person, I would get paralyzed
Hmm.
sometimes by just the fear that what, I was going to be judged, or people are going to be upset with me,
Right.
if I were to ask for something
Right.
or if I needed something.
Yeah, and that'll turn people away. I think I don't think that's necessarily needed in today's world. Like Hunter was saying, kindness and love. We don't know what we don't know, and I don't want to be chastised for asking a question from an elder, like, or even somebody that might know a little bit more than me. Like, I want to know that I'm worth their time. And the only way we create this change is through connection. And if people are unwilling to connect because of some old way of thinking, it's not healthy for us, and it doesn't help foster that change.
I
you know
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, even like we know that there's a stigma, right? With maybe saying you're an alcoholic or you need treatment or you're using drugs, right? And a lot of members are like, they're worried about other tribal members knowing. I mean, for us, we believe that maybe sometimes access to a treatment center away from home is important. So there's anonymity,
Mhm.
right? And the ability to really work on or talk about things that have happened to them within their community. I mean, sometimes the access is the escape to somewhere safe for a minute so they can heal themselves. I mean, because,
Absolutely.
and, how many, if we look at like AA groups, are they everywhere on reservations, or well variety groups everywhere on reservations? Or is there enough access to those things? I mean, because when I look at it, a lot of these communities might only have 4 or 5 people, but there are thousands of alcoholics that need, or addicts that need access, but there's this worried about being judged.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and why is that continuing to happen with such a high rate of addiction? I mean, what is the fear? I mean, and to me that's a scary thing. It's like we have all these things that are happening in our families and we're still worried, like we're the only one, like we're unique.
Yeah.
And it's that's not real. I mean, we see, we even within our tribe we can see how many people are dying on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
And it's like, is that preventable?
It's all preventable.
It is.
It's all preventable. And we have the highest death rates from addiction, uh, in our individual communities, but as people as a whole. The health disparities are there. The overdose rates are there. We see them front and center. And is that enough to jar our leaders into real action at the community level, uh, to be those voices of reason for accessibility, like having our family members and our community members pass from a preventable disease, we've come a long way, right? To say, hey, let's talk about prevention. Hey, let's talk about access to treatment. But then the last point is, once we have access to prevention, treatment, and treatment resources, where is the recovery that you're talking about? When you go back to your community, where are those groups? And why are they still scared to go to an AA meeting
Mhm.
or an NA meeting? Or why are
Mhm.
they scared to have their cars seen at the church or community center where that meeting is occurring, right?
Mhm.
We should be embracing, our tribal members who are seeking those services. And I think that's part of the education that we need to implement within our communities, to take pride in our members who are in recovery. And we should be raising them up to a level of accomplishment as, folks that have overcome something that is, it is a death sentence,
It is.
and they beat it.
I mean, and I mean, to me, that's a cultural shift. We need this
Yeah.
cultural shift in our communities to say we're willing to invest in someone going to college. Why aren't we willing to invest the same energy into getting sober?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
whether it's job training afterwards or housing to create it stabilized. Because I mean, we know that people in addiction have this, they're in transition always. And it's, if you're in transition always and then you're unhoused, you can't really work when you're in survival mode. I mean, and we know, like you said, the housing in a lot of tribal communities, it's not like we can just leave our families and go rent an apartment because they don't exist on reservations. There isn't just like this extra apartment for anyone that needs it. I mean, sometimes it's just you have to move to someone else's house, another family member, and it's overcrowded. I mean, to me, it's the stigma of understanding we need all this cultural shift.
Yeah.
Which is, to me, it's building economies, but also being honest about our problems and not pretending that we don't need help from the outside world.
Well, we don't need to hide anymore, and I think that's a part of the issue is we're still hiding certain things, and we need to figure out on how to bring a lot of this stuff out of the shadows within our communities now and collectively come together to create this change or participate. It's happening right now. The change is happening, and we just need more people to sign on and be willing to advocate for it and not advocate, behind closed doors. We support this, this is good. And then, publicly you're not willing to stand next to that person.
And so I don't know if everyone knows this, but we have a rehabilitation center. It's Thundermaker Wellness. We're able to you can get a hold of us at thundermakerwellness.com. Um, there's a phone number on there. You can call us or, email us. You can also contact us on social media. It's Thundermaker Wellness. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook,
Instagram.
So, I mean, we're here to be a resource for tribes and tribal members, and it's important because everything we're talking about is how we're trying to create our center, our healing, modalities. We're trying to build community. The goal is to build leaders. It's not just to get people sober; it's to allow them to re-enter their communities with
Dignity,
dignity,
pride.
and you know, excited to go back and find their cultures or find their traditional ways. I mean, we're not trying to make anyone into sun dancers. We're trying to get them excited about finding their traditional ways. I mean, because we sweat, and for us, at least for me, it's one of the most invaluable things that I've done in my sobriety journey and following the red road. I mean, I'm not a Christian, but I I do I do believe spirituality is one of the most important things that I've been able to connect with.
I do like the fact that everyone within our community, everyone that works and comes around Thundermaker Wellness, we all participate on a daily basis in the ceremony. Like we sit down with the relatives that are there. We have conversations. We sweat twice a week. We share meals. We cook together. We do all of these things together. Nobody within our community is an outsider or somebody that doesn't participate or equally contributes to the overall table. For me, that's amazing. That we're walking our talk. We're doing what we're sharing with the relatives. Like to me, that's amazing. And the relatives that come in, they see that and they want to be a part of that. And to see the change taking place within our relatives that are in our care has just been amazing to witness. And I'm so proud of what we're doing and how we're going about doing it. And the team that we have is just incredible, and I love coming to work on a daily basis. I look forward to the ceremonies, to the traveling, to the conversations, to the meals, to everything. It's definitely something that helps instill more hope and change within me as an individual. And I couldn't be more proud of the people that we surround ourselves with on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. Oh, so, but yeah, do you have any final words, Alec? Or any final thoughts?
No, I think this was a great conversation about stigma, and I think we had some real actionable items on overcoming stigma on various levels. We need to overcome it on a personal,
Mhm.
self-realization level.
Mm-hmm.
We need to overcome it, from a overall community or systemic structural, barrier. And, how do we change our impact policies within our tribal communities to make sure that access to addiction services and mental health services are achievable and attainable with pride and dignity. And then, of course, the larger, more public awareness sort of way to tackle stigma on how do we change the negative perceptions that are placed on tribal communities across the nation because of these negative stereotypes.
Well, thank you for that, Alec. And I'll say it again. You can contact us at thundermakerwellness.com, on any of the social media, Thundermaker Wellness, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and yeah. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Been a gig.
Indians anyway, they're going to become more repressive because it's a